Would you please be seated? Let us pray together. Almighty God, as we embark upon the important business of the council meeting this evening, we would seek your presence, your guidance, and your blessing. We ask your blessing on the Mayor, Councillor Marion Ring, as she chairs this meeting, and on all the councillors as they consider and discuss each point of business. We have remembered before you our esteemed friend and colleague, the late Deputy Mayor Councillor Wendy Hinder. We give thanks for her life and service to this borough and pray for your comfort and strength for her husband, Councillor Bob Hinder, and their family. We thank you, Father, for those who are prepared to give of their time, offering their gifts and skills in order to be present here tonight, sacrificing time with loved ones so that they might undertake this important work. Would you give courage to always speak up for justice for all? May all discussion be conducted in a spirit of charity and goodwill, particularly in those matters in which there may be disagreement, with the desire to seek only the common good. We bring you our genuine concerns for this borough. We desire only that all our citizens may live in a sense of peace and safety and security. We remember those organisations and agencies, emergency services, churches and others, which daily work that Maidstone might be a good place to live, in the knowledge that in time of need and distress, help is at hand. We pray especially this evening for those in our community who, for whatever reason, are sleeping rough. We give thanks for those initiatives, especially of recent months, which have reduced their number, and we pray that the time will come when nobody needs to sleep without shelter and warmth. Gracious God, will you look upon us as we bring all the matters that will be considered this evening, and may the time spent be such, and the outcomes agreed, be according to your will. We offer these our prayers through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Oh, sorry. Webcast are recorded by the council, but will anybody else be recording or filming them? I ask so that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening.
Councillor Mackay?
Yeah, Councillor Mackay. Thank you. Did I see any other hands? No? No. Thank you. Item 2, I have received apologies for absence from Councillors McLaughlin, Pearl, Rose and Wilby. Item 3, are there any applications for dispensation? Oh, sorry.
2 roses.
Oh, 2?
It's Margaret Rose.
Oh, I'm sorry. Margaret Rose. So are there any applications for dispensations?
No, Madam Mayor, there were no applications.
Thank you. Item 4. Are there any disclosable pecuniary interests, other significant interests by members? Thank you. Is there any disclosure of officers?
On this occasion, yes, Madam Mayor. So we would disclose an interest on, I would like to disclose an interest on behalf of all members of staff present in the report of the Democracy and General Purposes Committee relating to the Pay Policy Statement 2020.
Thank you. Any disclosures of lobbying? Is it agreed that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed? Thank you. Are the minutes of the meeting of the Borough Council held on the 18th of December 2019 agreed as a correct record? Thank you. Mayor's announcements. Been busy, but it's been very sad. I've worried for days what I'm going to say to you all tonight. So I've not written it down, it'll come from the art later. Or do I do it now?
So do whatever you want to say about
Can I?
general announcements
Okay.
and then move on to Wendy.
Right. There's no general announcements because I think tonight is for Wendy. My only saving grace was I had an afternoon with her the day before she went in hospital. And we had a little laugh and talk about the food. But it was nice. So at that moment of time, she really didn't know anything. But I think my heart goes more. Wendy now is not in any pain. She's now at rest. And we won't forget her. I've known her 17 years. And I know lots of you have as well. So we won't forget her. But my concern now, and I know that would be Wendy's, is that we look after Bob in all the best way we can. Because this is going to be hard for a man who's been married to a lady 50-something years. It would be the simple things like getting up in the morning, only making 1 cup of coffee instead of 2. I don't know how that feels, but I can imagine it. So one morning I'd like him to come round to my house and we'll make 2. And I know you're all very kind and I know you will keep encouraging him to the best that we can until he feels that he can cope. So God rest his soul. Now going over to item 9. Oh, that now. Right. No, we're not going to item 9. I would like to ask the leaders of the groups to stand up, or their representative, to say a few words. Martin.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. We've had a moment's silence, but I know there will be times in all of our days as we go about and do our business within the Borough Council that we will suddenly turn round and not see Wendy at a committee. I was with Wendy at the Cobtree meeting days before all this sadness happened. And she was adding to the meeting as she always did. She was concerned about the young farmers getting the use of the fields and making sure that we could do the best for them and include them. And I know that everything that we go about our business doing, as Wendy, as you've said, Madam Mayor, that we will think I wonder what Wendy would have done. But what I want to point out, on all the committees that she was on, licensing, heritage, culture and leisure, the Beauvais twinning, whenever you saw Wendy, you saw Bob. They were the best double act this council has. And I hope, as we've been told, Bob, that you carry on, because you know she would want you to. I know that all the Lib Dem members behind me would offer their condolences, as we did, to you and your family, but also to the Conservatives sitting in front as a group. You've missed a member, you've missed a rock, and our condolences are with you, and our thoughts are with Bob and the family. Thank you very much.
Councillor Perry.
This is a terribly sad occasion. I really feel this, and thank you for your words, Madam Mayor, and you, Martin, if I can be a little bit less formal. Wendy was one of our most dedicated, I think, and hard-working and experienced councillors. There's no doubt about that. She represented Boxley Ward as a parish councillor and as a borough councillor. And we all know she'll be terribly sadly missed, missed in our group very much, and missed, I'm sure, in the council as a whole. But Wendy will be particularly remembered, I think, for her work on the borough's licensing committee. She chaired it, she was vice chairman of it, and I have personal experience of this because last year we had a very, very gruelling licensing hearing, really tricky one that went on all day. And I can absolutely tell you that the opposition, the objectors, put up a Queen's Council, and Wendy was, and the rest of the team, I will say as well, were more than a match for the Queen's Council. She was absolutely terrific, and it was a very hard and a very gruelling day. And I think it said everything about Wendy. It really did. She's also, of course, been a very hard-working deputy mayor this year, and I think one of the great sadness of all this is we won't see her as mayor, and I'm sure Wendy would have made a wonderful mayor. I mean, she's perfect for the job. But I think Wendy was more than this. She was very kind, she was very gentle, and above all, she was very, very loyal. And I think these are wonderful things to have. And I know that when I first became a councillor, she was extremely kind and extremely helpful to me, and I've never, ever forgotten that. Dear Bob, it's been a privilege to know Wendy. I can really say that. And I'm absolutely honoured, and I think everybody else in this room is absolutely honoured to see you here tonight. I really, really do think that's a wonderful thing for you to do. And just one final word. You are very important to us all. Martin said it, and I reiterate it. And we will help you, of course, and support you in every way we can. But it's wonderful to see you here tonight. I know it's very sad circumstances, but as I said, we're honoured that you're here. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Mackay?
On behalf of the Labour Group, I asked Mr. Carper to speak, as he knew Wendy a lot better than I, and I think he will speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, thank you for that. I only knew Wendy since 2014 when I came on the council. However, during 2018, I worked very closely with Wendy and Bob on heritage, culture and leisure, and I really used to appreciate Wendy's in-depth knowledge of the topics we'd cover, especially being new to the committee, and the knowledge and interest and enthusiasm she had for the issues we used to discuss. And as chair of that committee, I used to regularly visit Wendy and Bob at their home to go through and talk through issues. And Wendy was always really hospitable when I went to visit them. I think Wendy was a champion for her views, and one of the things she wanted to do was to actually get greater use of this town hall. And at our last meeting of ERL, we pushed that through to Policy and Resources, and I hope Policy and Resources will reflect on the wish of Wendy that this building is used by the community at weekends. Wendy was very approachable and very willing to consider ideas and tell you her thoughts on people's suggestions, which I think is a really great thing. And I know that with Bob, the two of them really enjoyed their holidays. And I can remember chatting to them about their holidays, and even at the point when Wendy was talking about being deputy mayor, I was actually over at their house, and they were concerned that they might not get all their holidays in for the next 2 years, being deputy mayor and mayor, and that was one of the big considerations in making that decision. And I think Wendy did the right thing. I mean, she's been a very good deputy mayor, you know, but it just shows, you know, people are, you know, we're all human. So really, my and the Labour group's thoughts are really with Wendy and very much with Bob. And all I'd say is just remember all the good times you've had, and Wendy's will always live on with all of us. And I'd just like to finally say thank you, Wendy, for enriching all of our lives.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Where's Eddie? Oh. Councillor Fay-Gooch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was halfway around the world, South Africa in fact, when I picked up the email trail carrying the news of what had happened. It was no less of a terrible shock than if I'd been right here in Maidstone. It's difficult to comprehend how something so heart-wrenching can happen in such a short space of time. It's all too sad for words. Like many of us here, I was very fond of Wendy. I respected her views, her forthrightness, her commitment to Boxley, and indeed her commitment to the whole borough. As my colleague Janetta Sands will testify, Wendy was certainly honest, caring, always wanted to do what she felt was right at a difficult time, and no more so when she served on the Planning Referrals Committee. Remember that? Woodcut Farms a few years ago. But as our Deputy Mayor, Wendy was so looking forward to the honour of being Mayor of Maidstone with her husband Bob at her side. It wasn't to be, and instead this evening, all of us across all the groups, regardless of our political standing, we all pay tribute to this well-respected colleague, a lovely lady. God bless you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eddie Powell.
An extremely kind of sad.
Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah. An extremely sad occasion. I mean, I've known Wendy since 2014, same as Councillor Perry and Councillor Harper. We all joined the council together, and Wendy was so welcoming. She wasn't worried about she probably had a political aspect to herself, but she wasn't worried about that. All she was concerned about is people and the fact that we were going to settle in to a completely strange environment, and she would make us welcome wherever she possibly could. I never actually worked on any committees with Wendy, but I always used to share different jokes with her about different things, and she was always pulling me up and saying, Eddie, behave yourself, which is wonderful. And after a while, I got to know Bob as well, and then realised what a very, very special couple they were. We also had mutual friends as well, which made perhaps put a little bit of pressure on me that I said the right thing at the right time. And again, we joked about it. We was, pleasant. But the work that they did with people in their own community, and they're constantly coming and bringing the issues, and really, really good, what I call sensible issues, to the council on behalf of those people. They devoted their life to family and their council work at both parish and borough level. And I would say without Bob without Wendy, or Wendy without Bob, you were a tremendous team. You was a team in action. But Bob, Wendy is still with you, because that's where she's going to live forever. And you will take her wherever you go, whenever you speak. It will be the voice of Wendy and also the voice of Bob. But I really offer you God's blessing tonight, Bob, and take strength from that. And there's a wonderful group of people here. I mean, what's been said about you tonight is straight from the heart. And take those words and let that be your strength. Bless you.
Councillors, I know I've asked the leaders, and I know we've got a very busy evening, and I hope you keep this in mind when I say this. Are there any other councillors that would like to stand up and say a few words?
Anne Brindle.
Yeah, Anne Brindle. Yeah. Anne. Denise. Annabelle. Is that fine? Okay. Anne. Councillor Brindle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I first met Wendy in 2004 when she was elected with my husband Adrian to this illustrious company. In the early years, when the discussions turned to all things council, Bob and I would threaten to repair to the nearest pub for respite. But in the ensuing years, I began to realise that Wendy possessed that rare thing, a sense of duty, both to Maidstone Borough and to both parish and borough council and all the residents that live in Boxley Ward. She was dedicated to improving the lives of those who needed her help, and many have benefited from her tenacious determination to get things done. Much, I am sure, to the consternation of some members of both KCC and NBC employees alike. Thankfully, the legacy of projects that she has left behind will last and last. Wendy, it was a privilege to count you as a treasured friend and a valued resource for me as a newly elected councillor. I and your extended family at Barn Cottage will miss you, and your memory will live in our hearts and minds forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Denise Joy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been on the council over 20 years, and in that time, I think Wendy and I have both shared licensing. It took us a long time to get where we were. When I think how many votes there were about who should be chair, who should be vice chair, and we'd go off in this little huddle and we'd just say, can't we both be it? Why have we got to choose one? And then for a while that was how it worked. When we sat on committee, it was never political. It was what was right. And I don't think I ever remember sitting on a committee with Wendy and we weren't in agreement on what we were doing, and the same goes for Bob. And when it was the three of us, although we were there to do a job, it was those moments when we were having a coffee and talking, and that I shall remember forever. But I too want to share what everyone said. I've been married 46 years now, and I can't imagine, because like you, Kenny and I are very, very similar. So I just want you to know, Bob, that so many of us feel and understand what you're going through, and just use us. We're all here to help. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Annabelle Blackmore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think most things have actually been said this evening. However, one thing I would like to add is I did go and see Wendy when she was in hospital. And I spoke to Bob on the day when I found out she was ill and in hospital, and Bob said, there is one thing you can do, Annabelle, will you go and see her? So I popped in to see her. I said hello. I know Wendy recognised me. She smiled at me, and as she was drifting in and out of consciousness, we were standing round her bed chatting about inanities, sometimes to Wendy, sometimes over her head. It was one of those surreal situations. I mean, I know Andrew, Wendy and Bob's son, is here tonight. Probably not many of you will remember him from the deputy mayor-making ceremony, but he is here tonight. Wendy and Bob were married for 58 years. That's longer than I've been alive. I can't even imagine being together with someone for that period of time. And there's no doubt about it, Wendy was an incredibly well-turned-out lady. Thanks very much to Bob. At the Christmas party, she turned around to Bob and she said, will you go and get my coat? Which one? You know my coat. Off Bob trotted, and he came back and he said, I'm not sure which one is your coat. Clearly, Wendy has lots of coats, unlike the rest of us. But Wendy was like a second mum to me. And there were times when she's reprimanded me for things I did, reprimanded me for things that I didn't do, but she would always warmly congratulate me for something that I did do. And I know that goes for everyone within this chamber, and probably for Andrew and also his brother Mark as well. So although, Bob, I haven't or wasn't married to someone for 58 years, Andrew, I think I can empathise with you as to what you are going through, because I lost my mother last year, so I do know what that feels like. But all our love and luck to all of you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, everybody, for these all lovely, kind words to Bob. You can't see... Oh, you can see me, Bob. Please, at your own time.
Can I say how touching it's been sitting here tonight, hearing all your wonderful words. She was a very special lady. I met Wendy when she was only 15, and I was 16. I'd joined the Navy and went ashore one day and saw this rather attractive lady walking down Plymouth Hoe. And I think I fell in love that day. Followed her, talking, and that was in 1957. So that's how long I've known her. I've always been impressed by the way she dressed, the way she cared for herself. I shall never forget the last thing that Wendy always did before she went out the door was to look in the mirror and with a piece of tissue just make sure her lips were ready before she went out. She always did that. I'm immensely proud of my wife, and I always will be. Can I say that she got me into politics when she became a parish councillor in 2000, and she tried her hardest to get me interested in it, but I resisted. I didn't want to know. But she kept working on me, and eventually I became a parish councillor and then a borough councillor in 2008. But secretly, our wish, both of us, was to serve together in Boxley. And fortunately, that happened two years ago. And it's been absolutely wonderful working during that time with my wife. I always looked upon my wife as someone who had an inventive mind and could see things. And then she would turn to me and say, right, I've identified the problem, now you get on and sort it. And our married life was very much like that, as well as our political life.
And it worked. I shall always, always remember her. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Item 9, that there are no petitions this evening. 10, questions and answer sessions for members of the public. Before I ask the first one up, can I just say thank you so much for sitting there so patiently while we were dealing with our grief. Thank you. I have received notification that Mr. Robert Atkin wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee. Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
Good evening. Firstly, my condolences to Councillor Hinder. On the 18th of December 2019, this council debated slowing down the call for sites process in favour of pushing back on the housing numbers to government and undertaking a proper assessment of infrastructure needed across the borough. Councillors voted instead for a motion that sped the call of sites process up to avoid the local plan review being extended. The Save Our Heath Lands Action Group learnt on the 5th of February that you have now decided to slow the process down. Can the residents of Maidstone really trust and have confidence that this council has proper control of its local planning process?
Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Atkin, let me cut straight to the crux of your question there. It's not our process, I only wish it was. The process that we are running is set down in front of us by government. It is in law. It is our role to go through that process. I wish we could change it. I would urge you to take those matters up more directly with our members of Parliament who do indeed have that power. But our role is to go through the process. If we abdicate that responsibility, then the penalty is imposed development. And I think on balance, that's the worst thing for this borough. On the matter of your comment regarding the decision to delay the process, that decision has not in actual fact been taken yet. I think you're aware that members have been briefed upon the matters relating to this, but that decision is yet to come to my committee, the Strategic Planning Committee. That will do so in March, and then depending upon our deliberations, we will make a recommendation to this full council to adopt or otherwise a modified timescale. But that decision isn't actually made yet. We have, with others, written to government challenging the target and the timescales. Until such time as we're actually given the authority to, or the assurance that the rules have been changed for us, in particular the timescale, it's not our control that it can be any quicker or any slower than 2022. Right, we could do it quicker than 2022, nigh on impossible, I would urge. But that's an absolute deadline that's set in the legislation. We can't extend that unilaterally. We may yet make petition to try to do so, but it's not directly in our power. I hope that gives you some answers.
Are any group leaders or representatives present would also like to respond? Yes, sorry.
Thank you very much. I'd just really like to endorse and confirm that please take this up with the MPs, because it's the MPs that are closest to government, they're closest to the ministers that could adjust this and that should be listening to us and listening to you as well. So please push it with them. We have tried, and it needs to be the voice of the people that voted them to their positions as well. Thank you.
Councillor, oh,
Just ask.
yeah, any other group leader?
Eddie.
Councillor Powell?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. This has confused the life out of me, this question, not that the question, I think the question was excellent. I attended a meeting recently at Lenham where the MP actually stated that it was the responsibility of the council to start asking more questions of the government and to stop blaming the MP or the government for everything that was going on. So, you know, what is right? I really don't know.
Behave. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Any other leader? Councillor Perry?
No, I'll be very, very quick. Yes, well, the MP would say that. I think I won't go into any more than that. But what I want to say is the motion was debated. We discussed it, and it was, it was a good motion. But the point is, if we'd accepted that motion, that would have delayed the whole process. This is a very tight timescale, and you could have ended up, or we could have ended up, in a far worse position. And that's the reason why we took a slightly different motion, and I think was the right motion on the night. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any others? Thank you. What do I do now? Let's go back.
Supplementary now.
Mr Atkins, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee arising out of your original question or the reply?
Yes, if I could. So the question is then, is this council's local planning process member-led or officer-led?
Come to the SPY meeting in March and see the members making the decisions. I don't know where you got the idea that it had already been made, that decision, but it's yet to be made. Come and see that in practice. I'd personally invite you.
Can I ask just very, very kindly, when a councillor is speaking or a member of the public, the floor is theirs, nobody else's, so sorry. Any group leader that spoke, is there anything that you would like to respond to Mr Atkins on this question? No? So thank you very much, Mr Atkins.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I know it may be a little bit early, but this decision part is from the public is only down for an hour, but I think it may go over. Would everybody be quite happy for that to happen so everybody gets a voice? Yes. Thank you very much. I received notification that Mr Steve Healy wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Policy and Resource Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Save Our Heathlands Action Group were expecting your long overdue letter to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government to robustly pushed back on the housing numbers determined for Maidstone. We were therefore disappointed that instead, the general thrust was give us a break now and we'll deliver more for you later. Is this an admission that this council actually accepts the new housing targets set by government, but can't politically agree its strategy on how to deliver its next 5-year housing supply?
Councillor Cox, would you like to reply?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr Healy, for the question. This characterisation of the Council's approach to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government is incorrect. We've been clear about our strategy, and this is the result of a motion agreed at full council in December 2019. The current housing requirement for Maidstone Borough Council is 883 homes per year. The current local plan, adopted in 2017, has enough land allocated to enable this to happen in the period from now until the end of the planned period 2031. The new standardised methodology introduced by the government in July 2018 raises the housing requirement to 1,236 houses per year with effect from 2022. When the new method was introduced, there was a cap on the amount of the uplift in housing required from that originally agreed. The cap is an uplift, 40% uplift. The rise in housing requirement for Maidstone Borough reached this 40% cap. The housing requirement has an impact not only on the amount of land that needs to be allocated, but also on the two crucial tests, the 5-year housing land supply and the housing delivery test. If Maidstone doesn't have a 5-year housing land supply in place, then we lose control of development. If Maidstone doesn't meet the housing delivery test, then depending on the extent of the failure, the government requires an action plan, a buffer, i.e. more land has to be allocated and there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development, i.e. the loss of the control of development. Maidstone is one of only 4 districts in Kent to meet this housing delivery test in 2019. Our letter to the Secretary of State focused on 4 changes. 1, that the 5-year housing land supply should be calculated on the assumption of 883 homes per annum until 2031 and not 1236 from 2022, i.e. a significant reduction on the requirement of around 3,500. 2, that the purpose of the 3-year housing delivery test for Maidstone should be set at 883 houses per annum until 2031, being the end of our current local plan period, i.e. a reduction of this 3,500. 3, that the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government revisit the standard methodology for the assessment of housing need and consider markedly reducing the uplift cap to bring it below 40%. And lastly, that for our local plan review purposes, increased housing growth brought about by the standardised methodology for assessing housing need will not be delivered by way of a straight line trajectory from 2022, but instead incrementally with over-delivery occurring in the latter years of the local plan. The review period between 2031 and 2037, that's the point that we want to make it happen. So, if government do not agree to retaining the housing requirement at 883, then we will no longer have to plan for the delivery of the additional homes. So, a letter stating the context of these changes was sent to the Secretary of State in January and signed by all Maidstone political party group leaders and by Helen Grant MP. The leader of KCC and Helen Whately declined to sign the letter, but decided instead to pursue separate channels of communication on the matter. At the Council's request, Helen Grant has asked for a face-to-face meeting with the Secretary of State, and we wait for this outcome to be put into place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Are there any group leaders or their representatives present who'd like to respond also?
Group leaders.
Group leaders or their representative.
Yes, Emma Curran.
Yeah. No, you... Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The answer is no to your question.
I know it was a very short answer, but you still should have stood up, Councillor Mackay. Next time, maybe.
The answer is still no.
Yeah. Councillor Powell.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Could Councillor Newton come back on this question?
If you've asked him to be your representative, fine.
Well, a bit creaky.
If you are not okay, sir, you're allowed to sit down.
That's okay. I'll
Yeah?
stand.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would ask the leader of this council, did you get a reply from Mr. Robert Jenrick? Because I wrote to him on the 18th of November, the day before I had my heart attack, and I have not even had an acknowledgement of the letter. And this is his attitude. So I think that needs publicising. I think he's downright ignorant.
Thank you. I will move on because, yeah.
So you need to ask if he's got a supplementary.
Yeah. Mr. Healy, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the chairman of the Policy and Resource Committee arising out of your original question or the reply?
Yes, I do, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Also in that letter to the Secretary of State, you referred to widespread community resistance with a firm anti-house building sentiment, making positive consultation and engagement extremely difficult to achieve. Our MP Helen Whately has undertaken consultation and engagement on your council-led garden community proposal in the absence of anything done by this council. 96% of respondents to that survey said they didn't support the proposals. 64% of the people that responded to that survey said they didn't support garden community approach in any form. Is the anti-building sentiment and community resistance actually a result of this council's failing to listen to its own residents?
Councillor Cox.
Thank you very much for your supplementary question. I'd always like to hear that percentages are backed up by how many people you were asking in the first place as one issue. But I do understand that whenever anybody asks for an opinion, rightly so, you will get engagement from a lot of people if it's very relative to where they are. And when we engage with the whole council, as the whole borough as a whole over something, we might get 2,500 responses. So I do see what you're saying, but I think it's very unfair of the MP to say what she said so far and not actually stand by what we're asking her to do, and that is approach the government either with us or separately as she has done. But in answer, and I'm sure you're wondering, I think I did sort of allude to it at the end of my first recourse, is no, I haven't had a response from Mr. Jenrick. He's not going to get off that lightly. That was the first letter. That was the first shot. He's going to get several more until we get a response and until we get this sorted. But we cannot stop spinning the second plate and the others that we have to do as your councillors. We can't just go, oh, well, all right, well, somebody said no, we can't do this, so we'll stop. Because that plate will fall on the floor and we will be absolutely scuppered. So please, we are spinning both, we're trying to do as much as we can, and we will get the information, and we're willing to give you as much information as we feasibly can. But I always like to hear how many people are asked when you throw a percentage around. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other leaders? Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your supplementary question. I know that you were in the audience when myself and my colleagues were at the meeting there. So I'm not surprised at your questions which are very searching. You note the failure to listen. I just feel as if I want to say to you that we have listened and we are listening. It sounds absurd to say that, doesn't it? Because we're actually doing the very thing you and your colleagues and your residents do not want. I accept that. However, we have got to do what we have got to do. I'm really sorry. I wish we didn't have to. And I think I said at the meeting, I wish I could tip up the southeast of England so that all the housing and all the demands went north instead of coming south. But we have got to do this local plan. And the only way, one of the ways to do it, is through a garden community. It hasn't yet come out at the other end. There is nothing concrete that says the new Heathlands proposal will definitely come out the other end. We're not there yet. It may be found to be not viable, not possible, but we are putting it out there as a possibility down the line. If we don't do it, we'll have a government inspector to just come and say, sorry, you're going to have a garden community there, and by the way, we'll have one over in my ward, Barming, or over in wherever, another one in Staplehurst, let's say. So I appreciate your feeling that we are not taking any notice of you. We've written to the government to try to get the answers, and I support what the leader says. We'll keep on trying. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In answer to the supplementary and the 1,200 people that responded to Helen Whately's kind of survey, they were a complete varied bunch. This was not political. This wasn't Helen just trying to pick up names where she can canvass some elections. It was from lots of different people that I've actually spoken to. But I think in answer to your question and your thoughts, you are absolutely right, because what goes on within here tends to be black and white. I've listened to some of the answers tonight, that these answers were probably done 1-2 days ago, looked at, spell check. Everything was done properly. You've actually kind of acted tonight from your heart, and what you're saying is correct. We have got to start listening to people, or otherwise there will be problems moving forward. It's the people of this borough that should be deciding what goes on, and not necessarily that the members are, we're here to do what you want. It's not the other way round. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Mr. Healy. I have received notification that Miss Kate Ammond wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Policy and Resource Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. This council claims that they undertook a strategic environmental assessment of potential locations for a garden community, which included Lenham and a number of other sites across the borough. You claim that this included environmental, landscape, infrastructure, heritage and topographic considerations. Despite numerous requests for sight of this report by Save Our Heathlands Action Group, residents, our local MP, County Councillor, as well as Lenham Parish Council, you still will not share it on commercial confidentiality grounds. Please can you confirm what parts of environmental, landscape, infrastructure, heritage and topographic considerations are considered to be commercial?
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
Thank you very much, Ms Hammond, for your question. The Council wants to ensure that we lead and shape our place as it grows, including leading the master planning and investing to bring about high-quality housing and jobs to the borough. The Council has made a commitment to take a proactive role in creating and will consider investing in new places. This strategy was agreed at full council in December 2018 and had cross-party support. For this reason, the Council commissioned a report, Maidstone New Settlement Study, to inform recommendations about whether or not to pursue a council-led garden community proposition. This included commercial considerations relating, amongst other things, to the Council's potential investment role to bring about the delivery of a garden community. The report does make reference to current environmental, landscape, infrastructure, heritage and topography information, all of which is available to anyone in the public domain. This information in and of itself is not commercial. However, this is not the point. The current environmental, landscape, infrastructure, heritage and topography characteristics of any place result in opportunities and constraints. The way in which these are handled in the context of development includes commercial considerations and judgments. So the commercial sensitivity of the New Maidstone Settlement Study relates to the information on which the Council considered and subsequently chose to pursue a site as a master planner, investor and potentially developer. That information would have implications for the Council's position and that of other development proposers with schemes on other sites referred to this commercially and are too commercially sensitive. The whole document contains information having a bearing on the future and current negotiations by the Council, which, if made public, would prejudice the interests of the Council and other parties. The Council has considered redacting certain parts of the information from the report and publishing it in this reduced form. However, the commercially sensitive information contained in the report is considerable. It is for this reason that the redaction was considered to be impractical. The report was not commissioned for the local planning authority. A number of sites, including for garden community developments, have come forward following the call for sites. It is the task of the local planning authority to analyse the merits of all proposals. The Council has submitted documents to support this submission, and this information is in the public domain. Work on the options for the future development in the borough is underway, and any decision is subject to public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other leaders or their representatives present would also like to respond? I take that as a no then. Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I ask Councillor Tom Sams to speak in my place?
You certainly can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. I wasn't actually going to say anything on this because I didn't realise the protocol that other people could speak, just not leaders. But two of us have seen the report. It's been described by an officer as vanilla, and I believe that the community should see the report in its redacted form, but particularly in relation to Lenham. I don't see there's a problem with that one little bit, and I take great umbrage at the continual peddling of the same message. You can't see it, when loads of people do want to see it, and surely the Lenham residents will be only too pleased to even look at the part relating to Lenham, which will be a start for that community. So, to answer your question, as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason why you can't see that report relating to Lenham. Thank you.
Ms Abbott, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Chairman of the Policy and Resource Committee arising out of your original question or your reply?
Yes, please. This Council's insistence that they are unable to release any of the borough-wide analysis undertaken to reach Lenham Heath as a possible location tells residents instead that either this analysis doesn't exist or was the motivation to proceed with...
Sorry to interrupt, Ms. Sorry. It has to be a question, not a statement. Can you just twist it round a bit?
I'm almost there.
Thank you.
Okay. To proceed with Lenham Heath really based on political expediencies and convenience rather than a sound evidence-based planning strategy. So it's basically asking if it was based on an evidence-based planning strategy. Sorry.
I accept that. No worries, no worries. Councillor Cox, would you like to reply?
Thank you. Yes, consideration, when we look at the public interest test, it always follows procedure. It actually follows the Environmental Information Regulation of 2014. And we take all of these things. You've asked for it. You asked the question, could we see it? It's been evaluated, and I'm afraid we've come back with, it would just redact. It's a bit like looking at something that comes from a prisoner of war camp or somewhere. And they've just taken everything out because we only must give what is able to be seen. So it would come out as virtually nothing. But that's my response. I still stand by what I say. The redacted form would be virtually pointless.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other group leaders? Councillor Perry.
I'd like to ask Councillor Burden to speak, please.
Responding to your question here, I think the point that I would really like to make is that over there you have the Chairman of Policy and Resources, and they've looked at possible sites, let's say from a commercial perspective. Over here you've got the Chairman of Strategic Planning, and there are Strategic Planning committee members here. Nothing in that report that I'm aware of has come onto the table as separate evidence to make any decisions about which sites will or will not proceed. So, although it may have helped shape the council's suggestion, it has got nothing to do with the decision that this council will make as to which sites will or will not proceed. And I think it's really important to actually make it quite clear that separation of process. And maybe that does allay some of your concerns about this confidential information. If it's confidential, we won't be taking it into account in our decision making when it gets to SPI.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anybody else, please? No. So thank you, Ms. Hammond. Think you've had your turn. Thank you. I have received notification that Mrs. Susan Ogg wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Policy and Resource Committee.
Thank you. There has been a recent change on how people can pay NBC and have been withdrawn the facility to pay bills by cash. Please can you tell me why councillors or members of the public were not consulted about this decision?
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
Thank you very much for your question, Mrs. Hogg. The council has not withdrawn the facility to pay bills by cash and has no plans to withdraw this facility. You may be referring to a decision to remove cash payment machines from the Maidstone link from April 2020. These machines are coming to the end of their lease this year, so we have taken the decision not to renew them. One machine has already been removed, but the other machine remains available for use until April. Information about the change has been displayed in the link since Christmas, so that everyone making payments there would be aware of the changes. Each current cash-paying customer has been personally written to and has asked to contact us if they need to pay by cash so that we can explain the alternatives. After April, we will continue to accept cash payments by anyone who currently pays by cash through PayPoint for council tax, council invoices, litter fines, temporary accommodation rents and housing benefit overpayments. There are various PayPoint facilities at locations across Maidstone, and customers who are regular cash payers are likely to be familiar with these PayPoints, as it can also be used to pay utility bills. The PayPoint network has over 28,000 nationwide, but there are plenty in Maidstone. This has been an operational decision made in accordance with the Council's agreed scheme of delegation for decisions that can be made by Council officials, so no specific consultation with councillors or members of the public took place. However, the decision is in accordance with the Council's digital strategy agreed at Policy and Resources on the 25th of April 2018, which seeks to promote the most efficient methods of payment, such as digital payments and direct debit. Although only a small number of customers now pay their bills by cash, the Council is not keen to exclude anyone from being able to make payments to the Council because they're unwilling or unable to make payments like direct debit or online payments. So we will continue to offer the facility to pay by cash, whilst at the same time working actively to overcome barriers to other methods of payment. We will do this through the digital inclusion strategy, intended to ensure that all residents of the borough can acquire the skills and means to access digital services should they wish to. They can all come into the link, use the computers there, and also get assistance. So, thank you.
Any other leader wishing to answer? No? Yes. Councillor Mackay, thank you.
Stand up. So, the Chair of Policy and Resources has told you quite clearly, councillors were not consulted. This was done under delegated authority, and in my opinion, in a rather sneaky way. Residents who paid the council tax by cash previously were written to just prior to Christmas and told about the cash machines being withdrawn and given a form to complete a direct debit payment. They were not told of the planned introduction of PayPoint. I believe they were told about that in February. Now, I believe this was deceitful and done to make the life of officers and councillors easier. To claim this was in line with a digital strategy to encourage digital payment is bordering on deceitful, I think. We run car parks here which accept cash. Why do we do that? Because we're in competition in car parking. We're not in competition with anyone when it comes to paying council tax. Now, as regard to PayPoint, I think it's an excellent scheme, by the way. It is widely available across town. It is far more convenient to go to your local co-op or local newsagent and pay by PayPoint. Beggars the question why we didn't do it before, rather than come into Maidstone Council. But what I strongly object to is, like I say, leading people to believe between December and February that they would be denied the opportunity of paying by cash. I'm delighted now that council taxpayers know, but I don't think these sort of decisions should be left to officers.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? No.
Yes, there is.
Oh, Councillor Powell.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do agree with what Councillor Mackay was actually saying, to be quite honest. I wouldn't go as far to say it was deceitful, but what I would go as far as saying is that not enough notice was given to these people. Remember, the people that are paying by cash tend to be the people that are either elderly or that have low kind of means, or perhaps sometimes a low understanding. Now, I'm generalising, and I don't want somebody attacking me outside to say otherwise. But sometimes we've got to give people fair notice. You've actually got to spell things out to them, where the pay points are, what the benefits are, and give them time. In this case, there wasn't time given. And I think sometimes we've got to look in the mirror, look at the decisions we make, and say, we've got this one wrong. Now let's put it right.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? No? Then I would like to ask Mrs. Susan Ogg wishes to ask a question. Oh, sorry. Mrs. Ogg, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Chairman of the Policy and Resource Committee arising out of your original question or the reply?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Just over the page.
That's it. I have received notification that Mr. Michael Ogg wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Communities, Housing and Environment Committee.
Which one do I push? That's it, yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and may I pass my condolence on to Councillor Hinder and his family as well. My question is, can Maidstone Borough Council explain why your waste operator Biffa is allowing to place other residents' waste into other residents' wheelie bins, which they know they cannot collect, i.e. use of paint cans, which they then spill over the bin onto the public path, when it clearly states on the NBC website that you cannot take DIY stuff such as paint tins. What action will NBC take against Biffa, who is allowing its staff to do this, and evidence can be supplied to show this is happening?
Councillor Mortimer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the question, Mr. Hogg. The Council is aware of the alleged incident and intends to raise it with Biffa at its next contract management meeting. The Council has a strong partnership with Biffa, and our officers are content that any service shortfalls will be addressed in a positive and proportionate manner. Thank you.
Any other leaders? No. I take as a no. Mr. Ogg, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Chairman of the Communities, Housing and Environment Committee arising out of your original question or the reply?
Madam Mayor, there isn't one, and I am aware that an investigation is going on this matter.
Good. Thank you very much. I have received notification that Ms. Joan Langrick would like to wish to ask a question of the Chairman of the Communities, Housing and Environment Committee. You can move the table over, Maureen, yeah.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight.
You're welcome, Joan.
Yeah. My question is, please could the Council and similar authorities refrain from referring to anyone who is homeless as rough sleepers? This label, whether deserved or not, dehumanizes any homeless person who is also suffering a multitude of problems, which frequently lead to their being physically assaulted. Sometimes, as you know, sometimes actually urinated on. Surely history, you know we don't have to go back so far, has taught us once labelled men and women and even children are then too often treated as mere flotsam cut adrift in an out-of-control lifestyle, which must certainly be of their own choosing. A recently resurrected 400 years old vagabond law now even limits where the homeless are allowed to bed down for the night. Although sleeping in a public place is far safer than somewhere out of sight, some are even sleeping in bins. Because it is now illegal, it isn't surprising when MBC carried out their own research, they found no one sleeping in the high street. The fact that the winter shelter, which only opens from January to March, has fewer homeless taking advantage of this facility shouldn't surprise us. Firstly, because applicants have to apply to the local authorities who only work office hours and adhere to a strict regime. Also because those shelters rigidly stick to their no pets allowed policy when they are the only companions their owners can rely upon. Just a few weeks ago, the homeless charity Madam and myself held our second memorial service for over 30 homeless people who had died in the Maidstone area over the past 3 years. At our first memorial service, Will Myers, who was previously a Maidstone outreach worker, was deeply touched when he read out a list of 24 homeless people he had known by name and by nature, who had died frightened, shivering, and terribly alone in the Maidstone area. Somehow I can't help feeling friends and relatives who came to grieve that day would have been devastated if they had known we had merely referred to their loved ones as rough sleepers. Hopefully, MBC, that's where we can really lead the way, will now lead the way until everyone will show just a little bit more compassion in the future.
Thank you. Anybody? Leaders?
No, you need to go to Derek first.
Oh, Derek, I am so sorry. What is it with you? I always miss you.
Okay.
Small.
It's all right, I'm only little. It's the shadow of Councillor Cox, you see. Right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mrs. Etheridge, for your question, or if you don't mind you calling you Joan, because we've met a few times in the past. So, but the use rough sleeper is not intended to denigrate those who find themselves without housing. The term is promoted by government as contained in their rough sleeper strategy and delivery plan and used by a range of other organisations, including Shelter. In addition, we support the government's intention to review the 1824 Vagrancy Act. We understand that rough sleeper can be an emotive term, but we view this as a positive in focusing on the council's drive and ambition that no one should need to be rough sleeping. I am therefore pleased that our last official rough sleeper count in November 2019, no one was found to be rough sleeping, which is a remarkable achievement for the 48 rough sleepers identified 18 months ago. We remain committed to building on this success and to finding long-term solutions to prevent people from becoming homeless. The street count has shown a huge reduction in people rough sleeping. The number of people needing to use the winter shelter has reduced. So our interventions have addressed the most visible expression of the deep-rooted and complex topic of vulnerability and homelessness. The work of our team, their passion, resilience, going the extra mile, working with partners has achieved this, backed up with our decision makers making the risks such as our housing first and investing in accommodation. However, if you simply judge the situation on the reduction in our street count, this is only a cursory assessment. People who were rough sleeping and those who become rough sleepers or whom we may identify early will still be there. as you will appreciate the complexity of what we are addressing and investment to enable rehabilitation, reduction in risk factors and early intervention, so that no one is a rough sleeper. There is a strategy rough sleeper, a delivery plan of 2018, an action plan. We will work with local authorities, local government association and local authorities by winter 2019, that all authorities update their strategies and rebadge them as homelessness and rough sleeper strategies.
Any other leaders wish to speak? Councillor Perry.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you for this question and general statement. I think it's terribly important. One thing I think we must be sure of is we must not be complacent about this. It is very easy to be, because if you look at the statistics, I think the statistics don't show the full picture. And because of the Vagrancy Act, in fact, a lot of rough sleepers are hidden from view. And often I think the statistics that are quoted are understated. And I think we must always bear that in mind when we look into this problem. It is a major issue, and I think we must never be complacent, and we must obviously address it as urgently as we can. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. People don't choose to sleep on the streets or in woods. They're homeless. They would much prefer to sleep on a friend's sofa or a relation's sofa or floor even. But they are homeless. They haven't got a home to go to. So a very small percentage of the homeless find themselves obliged to sleep outside. But they are homeless first, and that's how they should be identified. By referring to them as rough sleepers, it can, in some people's mind, make you believe that they have chosen to live this way. Very, very few would choose to sleep this way. So I support the sentiments, and I will keep my response brief. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Oh. No.
Thank you. Oh.
So, Mrs. Lambrick, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Chairman of the Communities, Health and Environment Committee, arising out of your questions or the reply?
My question is very, very much on the reply. I feel so angry that people, even in their response, can use the word rough sleepers. Each member can choose to say something else. And if we cannot even agree on using another term which is more compassionate.
Okay, Joan. So the question is, because I think Councillor Mortimer did sort of answer it just a bit before, but I'd like him to repeat. They're going to work on trying to get the name changed because it's a government title.
I'm sorry, but I said here, the Maidstone Borough Council can actually lead the way. They can actually lead the way, referring to them as another way. More or less like a
sorry, Joan. Sorry. I'll tell you what, Joan, because I've known you a very, very long time, and I know your passions, and I know the reason why. I will ask Councillor Mortimer, we'll have a meeting, he can come down to the Mayor's office, and we will have a meeting on let's put our heads together with our fellow councillors, because I think they'd be more than happy to help. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What steps has the Council taken to approach owners of brownfield sites, particularly in or adjacent to the town centre, to encourage their redevelopment as a priority before other sites?
Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Horn. I'm sure you'll recollect from your time on this council that we always have given priority to brownfield sites. In fact, I think during your time, we actually had the moratorium on greenfield sites. So it's always been...
Sorry, Councillor, but I'm going to stop you because people are having conversations. Don't hide your head, I've seen you. And it's just so rude. So please don't do it. This gentleman has come as a visiting member to ask Councillor Burton a question and everybody else is trying to answer it between themselves. Sorry, David.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So having said that, we are proactive, and I'll give you a few examples. Most recently, proactively engaging with landowners on sites such as Moat Road, Gala Bingo. We all know what an eyesore that's been, or the old cinema complex for as long as it has. Yeah. Granada House, Len House, now empty and unoccupied, Maidstone West and the Riverside. Council proactively going out looking for what might be designated as brownfield sites. They're largely in private ownership, and our role is to work positively with these landowners to see what schemes can be brought forward. And I'm sure you'll all recollect the guidance documents that actually came before the SPY committee, which were approved purely as guidance documents to help facilitate these sites coming forwards. There's just a few examples. They're particularly around the town centre, but we're not restricted to the town centre. We'll go anywhere where there's a bit of ground land and wish to see that come forwards. And I think there is some traction with this. Those that do walk past Len House will see in the window there, the developer has put an information, or the site owner, potentially the developer of the site, has put an information display in the window, laying out exactly what they are looking to bring forwards. So I think there's some good news there. The council are proactive, and we'd all like to see these brownfield sites mopped up until there are none.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other leader wishing to speak? Councillor Mackay?
The Labour spokesman on economic regeneration would like to respond on behalf of the Labour group.
Okay. Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Harper.
As Councillor Burton was saying, the responsibility now for implementation of these 5 town centre sites has now been passed over to the Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee to take forward. And only yesterday was having a meeting with the head of the service to discuss how we actually go forward on all these sites. And as was pointed out earlier, the Len House site is likely to be going for a planning permission, possibly as early as May, to take that site forward. And the other sites are progressing at different speeds. It is the council's desire to see how we can take these forward. And as part of looking at how they are developed, we will be holding a workshop for members of the Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee in May to discuss with them their appetite in terms of taking forward brownfield sites in the town centre, especially after the recent debacle there was over the Broadway Centre, which everybody here is aware of. We need to make sure that we take these sites forward but in a way that we are taking the communities with us. And if we do, then we can see large elements of regeneration based on those 5 strategic sites.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? No. Thank you. Mr. Orne, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee arising out of your original question or reply?
One side. Yes, I think we've got... yes, Madam Mayor, thank you, I would. I'm heartened by the replies. Could the Chairman reassure me that there will be a dedicated team looking at this and that recommendations will be put forward where there's relevant and appropriate brownfield sites?
Mr. Horn, I can't say that there will be, because there already has been and there already is. Yes. So it's not a will be, it's happening. So it's 2 tracks by the SPY committee, setting out some planning guidance, and you've heard Councillor Harper say how our economic development team take the baton from there and push forwards. And it's not just those 5 development sites. You can see some work that we've done at various car parks. You can see this council's direct involvement at Maidstone East as well. It's proactive and it's happening now. No will be, is now.
I think you're happy with that, so I won't ask anybody else, Mr. Orne. Right, I've received notification that Mr. Peter Titchener wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, members. My question is as follows. Officers have repeatedly stated that our borough suffers from 30 years of underinvestment in infrastructure. What steps will you be taking to ensure that Maidstone's infrastructure catches up in terms of not only roads, but also other facilities provided by the public sector, such as GP practices and schools, and by the private sector, such as shops and restaurants?
Councillor Burton.
Again, thank you, Madam Mayor. Never mind what the officers repeatedly say. What about the members of this council? I think we've all repeatedly said there's deficit in infrastructure and we need to do everything possible to encourage and bring it forwards. The process is pretty clear. As part of the planning process, we identify the needs. With the infrastructure providers having identified the need, we have a tally up, we think, well, what might that cost? Having identified the cost, we do our best to empty the developers' pockets of aforesaid sum of money. Perhaps we top it up with government support grant as well, wherever possible. And then in the plan process, we allocate the room for these pieces of infrastructure. It might be a school, it might be a GP surgery. The frustrations begin where, regrettably, we as a council aren't the people who can actually deliver the service. There is an infrastructure working group jointly between this authority and our colleagues at Kent County Council, and we are particularly focused on these issues at the moment. So the last meeting particularly encouraged to actually have the presentation by the Kent Education Commissioning team. They're right on the game. They know exactly what the need is. They know exactly how they're going to provide for it. And I think if you look in the current plan making process, when you see the delivery of new schools, for example, at Langley Park, and it was the school that was built first before the houses, largely, you know, there is good stuff going on. When it gets to GP provision, it's a bit more difficult. We've asked them, and I think it boils down to the fact that all of us like, you know, a surgery locally with capacity, we could get an appointment to go and see a doctor. We've got the money in the bank account for them, but we can't employ them. Second half of your question, you actually refer to private sector delivery. You strike me as the kind of gentleman who's a fairly straightforward thinking free market economist. And I think you'll see other examples of success where, you know, the council have delivered allocations for the new hairdressers. the new coffee shop, the new supermarket, and actually the market has come into those allocations, and I think Langley Park's another good example of that. But although GP provision is somewhat of a free market economy because they are private contractors, we don't seem to be able to successfully intervene there, and open to suggestions. So I want to reassure you that we're doing everything I think we can. Importantly, we're emptying developers' pockets, and ambitiously we're looking at the larger propositions, and I am not referring to Lenham here, but if there is an opportunity to have a new settlement somewhere and we can capture land value uplift at a very early stage and have lots of money to deliver really big pieces of infrastructure, we're on that as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other leader wishing to reply to Mr Tidger? Councillor Cox.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for the question. I won't go back over what David said, but I think we should be of the opinion we're not going to leave any stone unturned. And therefore, if we may be able to invest in building these facilities and then renting them back, don't know, maybe something we will consider. But the infrastructure working group is very positive. It's showing very good partnership working with KCC, and we have a good work programme before us, and I think it's working cross-party and certainly cross this level government. So I think it's very positive, and what David has said I totally endorse.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Thank you. Mr Titchener, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Chairman of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee arising out of your original question or the reply?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I would, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you for your replies. I would like to just say that unless the infrastructure improvement in the widest sense is put forward...
Sorry, Mr Titchener, you've got to ask a question.
Sorry?
You must ask a question.
Well, it is a question. It's the next word is the question.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Shall I start again? I say, unless the infrastructure improvement in the widest sense is put forward by the respective providers, will Maidstone do a Sevenoaks and put forward a local plan review that plans for fewer houses than calculated using the government standard methodology, especially as in 2016 to 19, Maidstone built 35% more homes than required by the local plan?
Councillor Burton.
Mr Titchener, I sincerely hope we do a Sevenoaks. I mean, let's look at what's happened there recently. It was suggested that we shouldn't actually use neighbouring authorities as a live example. You heard earlier about the 3-year delivery test. I believe they've just failed miserably. The consequence of that is an imposed additional 20% on their numbers. And the assumption in favour of development that is vaguely sustainable under the MPPF is the consequence. Loss of control and an even bigger number. So I sincerely hope we're not going that route. We need to be in control of our destiny as far as we can. Regrettably, we don't make the rules about how the destiny is shaped, but we can have a big hand in preventing disaster, unmitigated disaster, which I believe is the consequence of that particular approach.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone of the other leaders wishing to reply? No. So thank you, Mr Titchener, for your question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Right, where are we now? Right. I have received notification that Mr Peter Coolin wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee. Fine.
Thank you very much. How will you assess and take control of commuting flows between our borough, surrounding areas and London when calculating the number and types of jobs you will plan for within our borough?
Thank you. Thank you for this question. I've been given a written response, as I'm sure we all have to all these questions, by our officers, but having read it, I'm not actually certain it's answering your question. So I'll start off by a few points and then I might read what I've been given to. I think there's 2 points to your question. There's one in terms of how many jobs we can try to generate within Maidstone to reduce commuting out of the borough, and the other thing is how we might assess the level of people likely to have to commute out of the borough in the future. Now, the current local plan, when that went through to the inspector and so on, worked on the basis that there would be an element of out-migration. So the number of homes being provided was going to generate more people of adult working age and actually would be able to be employed within Maidstone, therefore increasing the level of outward migration. We're now, as part of the local review or the local plan review process, updating the number of houses we're likely to be providing, and therefore we will be able to work the likely increase in the adult working population. And that will give us an idea of the number of people who are going to be moving in and might be looking for jobs. On the other side, the head of economic regeneration has just commissioned this week a piece of work which will be reported to committee on the 31st of March, looking at a new economic regeneration strategy for Maidstone, looking at areas of opportunities and where we may be able to develop our economy in future. And if you like, the answer to your question, I think, is the bridging point of those two things. So if you like, the planners will tell us our working age population will go up, I don't know, by 20, 30,000 with all the housing being built. And the economic development strategy will probably identify the types of areas we might be able to generate new jobs and the sort of numbers we might be able to do. Both those pieces of work are in process at the moment, but the likelihood is that the increasing the working age population will be greater than the number of jobs we're likely to be able to generate in Maidstone, and therefore there is going to be a net increase in people travelling outside of the borough for work. I mean, I myself today came straight from work here. I work in London, so I'm one of the people who, commutes out of the borough, and I would sincerely like to have a job locally. Our local economy needs an element of work done to it to be in that situation. The officer answer was very much talking about transport modelling and roads and looking at the railways and so on. But I think in a sense that's a bit esoteric. At the moment we need to know the hard facts and figures, and then we can do that second part. So hopefully that helps with what you're asking.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other leader who wishes to respond?
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I would like to do that. And there is a question here, by the way, okay? There is a question. Excellent. During the local plan examination, the inspector required MBC to take another look at employment, including the aspect of commuting flows across the wider economic area. That was Tunbridge and Malling, Ashford, Tunbridge Wells, Swale and Medway. What formal duty to cooperate dialogue have you had with any or all of those authorities to make sure that jobs, employment, commuting flows are looked at in a wider economic area? Duty to cooperate. Thank you.
I'm afraid, I think it's a very good question, but it's a bit out of my area of expertise. I think Councillor Burton is probably in a better position to be able to talk to you about the duty of care and some of those issues.
Would you like me to ask Councillor Burton?
Sorry, Madam Mayor. I think
Thank you.
I'd hope he would like to say a few words through yourself.
Councillor Burton, do you wish to answer? Thank you.
As the spokesman for the Labour Party, no. Duty to cooperate is a very powerful factor in local plan making now. I can assure you that duty to cooperate meetings are taking place. I'm going to share with you my concerns around this. The duty to cooperate meetings lead to statements of common understanding. Our scheme of delegation gives that entirely to officers currently, and it's not obliged to come to our committees. So members, it's something that I've been flagging for a while, and I would urge us to have a closer hand to that. I'm sure I'm getting daggers from over there somewhere, but this is something that does concern me, and I think we should see the product of these dialogues. The dialogues are happening. That's my contribution.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Don't want to pass it round? No, I'm only joking.
Not allowed to ask a supplementary, am I?
Yeah.
Oh,
Afraid not, Mr.
no.
Period. Yeah. Thank you very much for your questions. I have received notification that Mr. Robert Sinclair wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Planning Committee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When deciding an application, how much weight do you give to the opinion of KCC Highways?
Councillor English.
Mayor, it would depend on the application. If it's an application for, say, a listed building consent in a conservation area, very little. If it's an application that involves a major housing estate, for example, or an application we're having currently for a hotel, then clearly there are road implications or public transport implications, and like all statutory providers, where the relevant professional area is contacted or involved, we give as much weight as we can to the statutory undertaker or consultee, not least because we are required by case law in the England and Wales High Court and by the Court of Appeal so to do. And if we disregard the advice of any statutory consultee, we are required to give full reasons for doing so and to have considered those issues in a full and balanced way. We don't depart from the advice of any statutory consultee, whether it's KCC or anyone else, lightly, but sometimes we have, on particular issues, engaged our own professional advice, which enables us to assess the advice given to us by Kent Highways, or there have been factors that have to be taken into consideration outside of the local planning authority's remit. For example, we have to take into account any court cases, judicial reviews, for example. You may be aware that there have been a number of judicial reviews in the Maidstone area that impact on highway matters. The council is required to take that factor into account, as well as the advice that is originally given by Kent Highways or any other consultee. We also have to take into account the decisions of the local planning inspectorate and or the Secretary of State. And where we depart from the recommendations of Kent Highways or the Environment Agency, as it happens to be in some cases, it is based on a combination either of independent professional advice that gives a different opinion or external factors such as High Court decisions, Court of Appeal, Planning Inspectorate or Secretary of State's decisions.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other leader wishing to speak? Councillor Perry?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I don't disagree with anything that Councillor English has said, of course. My issue with this, I did have a wry smile when I saw the question, is that Kent Highways, in my experience, very rarely ever gives an opinion, or it certainly never gives an objection to anything. Very occasionally it does. And I did it, and I'm in the public domain on this one, so I will repeat it. I did say at one planning committee meeting a few months ago, I think, that I did suggest that we erected a banner across the back of the chairman that basically said Kent Highways has no objections. So, and it tends to be the history of this. As Clive has said, we have to follow the rules on it, but it's not terribly good at times, I'm afraid. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mackay?
I'd like our representative, Keith Atkinson, to respond on behalf of the Labour Party. I'm too annoyed.
Thank you, Councillor Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, it seems to me that we listen to KCC when we want to. I mean, for example, if KCC says no objection, we defer to them as a superior authority. However, if they do have an objection, which is a very rare thing, we tend to say, oh, well, we can just go ahead anyway. So I really think we should be looking into this. I mean, I think we'll know one specific one I'm referring to, but without wishing to predetermine, I'll say no more. But we seem to go along with the KCC only when it suits us. Thank you.
Councillor? Mr Sinclair, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the chairman of the planning committee? I just asked that, didn't I? No. Out of your original question or reply. Can I ask what that noise is? I tried to be patient. It's a what? Oh. Oh, is that what it is? We'll have to go home then, because we'll get cold. Right, thank you. Mr Sinclair, so do you wish to ask a supplementary question of Mr...
Yes, I do.
OK, go ahead.
I saw a recent planning meeting, and to be quite honest, I was horrified with the way it was dealt with. And as the Highways Authority, and I noticed what Councillor Pelly says that KCC don't object
is
to
it a
anything.
question, Mrs Sinclair?
KCC's judgment on highway issues should be afforded significant weight. What is the justification for the Council not giving KCC consultation response appropriate weight and not treating KCC's analysis as a material consideration capable of overriding the local plan policies?
Thank you. Councillor English?
Sorry about that, I was going internal. Unless that material consideration has arisen since the local plan took place, then it cannot override the local plan. Councillor Atkinson should know that. He really should know that. And it is unfortunate that he chose to ignore that. He's the only person tonight who's made a party political opinion. The fact of the matter is that in the circumstance you're referring to, not only has there been a tested recent local plan inquiry in which all of the points that KCC made on that particular set of applications were fully tested before a local plan inspector who dismissed them in full. There have been, around this particular complex of issues, a judicial review finding from the High Court in relation to a judicial review brought by a parish council. Now, in those circumstances, if the Borough Council chose to ignore those facts, it would not stop the planning application proceeding. It would simply mean there'd be an appeal. We would lose that appeal, hand over fist, and the ratepayers of Maidstone would have the joy of paying up to £1 million for the pleasure. Sorry, I'm not in that game of making declaratory statements to the gallery and a few months later having to pay the bill for it. We have to deliver housing to meet the government's targets, and we have to do it in accordance with the rules. And that is what we will continue to do. Now, the KCC did raise a number of new issues in relation to those applications, which had not been tested before the local planning inspectorate, because they related specifically to the local road network and not to the general issues that have been raised before a local planning inquiry. The planning committee, in relation to local road issues that were new, did not simply approve the application. We sent that the most recent one, for example, Church Road, away for further consideration, and as you will, I hope, know, that discussion has not concluded. It has not yet been reported back to committee, and those local issues that are new are being considered, and the advice of Kent Highways on this new issue is being given full weight and consideration, as you would expect.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mackay.
For those who didn't pick up the reference to the site, this is land west of Church Road, which the Chairman of Planning was referring to. And he's quite right. This was a site that KCC did not make any comment upon in terms of the local road network at the time of the local plan. But when it came forward for planning application, initial planning application, they did make substantial comments on the grounds of highway and safety, which were, I would have to say, summarily dismissed by Maidstone Borough Council. They did defer on one issue, but so when it suits Maidstone Borough Council, it would appear we do ignore KCC. I think it's regrettable that KCC have not always given detailed advice. I also would find it extraordinary if a site that we had included in our local plan and subsequently found that it would be unsafe on highway and safety grounds, had to proceed because it was included in our local plan. That just defies all logic. But I'll leave it there. I wasn't going to mention the site until the chairman mentioned it, so I'm glad it's out in the open and everybody knows what we're talking about. It's a site of 440 houses, which will not be able to be accessed by the bus network, by emergency services without great difficulty, and which we're proposing possibly to build 440 houses on.
Sorry. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, but we've got to do it in the proper way, I'm afraid. Is there anyone else? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Clare. I know it's getting late, everyone. It was just a very long agenda and circumstances, I'm afraid. Sorry. I have received notification that Mr. Stuart Jeffrey wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Policy and Resource Committee.
Thank you. It has been over 10 months since the Council declared a climate and biodiversity emergency, where it committed to review its policies with regards to these twin emergencies. Can you tell me which policies has the Council reviewed and changed since that declaration of an emergency?
Sorry, Councillor Leader.
I've just been good and waiting to be
Thank you.
Following the Council motion in April, a Councillor working group was set up in the summer to create the action plan in recognition of the global biodiversity climate change emergency. One of the first actions they took was to review the Council's new draft biodiversity strategy. They've also commented on the Kent and Medway energy and low emission strategy and the National Future Homes Standards. An action plan will be presented to the Policy and Resources Committee in April of this year, and the working group's action plan will identify strategies and plans that we will need to have in place to have an impact on the climate change and protect and enhance biodiversity. The action plan will include the recommended changes to planning policies, staffing levels, decision-making processes, our estate and our fleet, climate change adaptation, public behaviour change, and the local plan review. I hope that answers your question. They've done quite a lot, really.
Any other leader wishing to? No? Oh, Councillor Mackay, please.
Good evening, Stuart. I remember last year you coming forward, and first of all I'd say that a working group, as the leader Martin Cox has said, has been set up. The wording of the motion that was accepted 10 months ago was there will be a short review. Well, the problem is with using words such as short, everybody's got a different idea of what short is, 10 months. But it was agreed that they would bring a report to Policy and Resources. I actually sit on the working group. Am I frustrated? Yes, I am frustrated. But I suspect I share the frustration of everyone on that working group. But I hope that once we submit the report, we can get things going. But frustrated? Of Shetway.
You, Councillor. No one else? Okay. Mr. Jeffrey, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Chairman of the Policy and Resource Committee arising out of your original question or reply?
Yes, please. Given that 5 out of the 7 questions in the Council's current consultation on climate change are about personal actions rather than what the Council can do, should the Council be focusing on the significant and radical actions that it needs to take quickly, given the scale of the emergency, rather than worrying about individual actions?
Councillor Cox, would you like to reply?
I think that working group has set up getting the public survey started. They started that on which will close on the 20th of March. I think they've had almost 1,200 responses to that. they've looked at our own, or started to look at our own buildings, our own vehicles strategy as well, our ambitions to look forward and be able to change our vehicles, and also the people who work with us and are commissioned to do work for us. We'd like to encourage them to do stuff. And also I think the Go Green, Go Wild project that's ongoing are all building towards this. Do we look at, should we be pushing some over others? I hear what Councillor Mackay says. This is an additional group that meet, and we have our own committees as well that we have to sit on. I think if we're being told let's move quicker, we certainly, after tonight, hopefully, will have the budget in place to look after things that come forward, that the group will put forward to Policy and Resources. But at this stage, I really don't think they have enough momentum. I agree, if we were moving quicker, that we would have that momentum. But I think, looking at what you've said about the 7 items they're concentrating on, I think we've got to start somewhere and build to where we want to be. We have given a date quite in the future, and I'm sure everybody would like engagement. We are engaging with youth and young adults on the 23rd of March as well. So we have to engage with the public to identify where they would like us to go as well. And I'm sure your views this evening will be taken into consideration as well. But thank you for the supplementary.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mackay.
Don't take my word, Stuart, that I don't think we're taking this seriously. We're about to approve a budget this evening which will give £1 million in capital expenditure towards this. My frustration is, I suspect, shared with yourself, that you'd want things to go forward quickly. But I tell you what, I am delighted that with the engagement of senior officers within the council and officers at every level for their enthusiasm to embrace this. So while I'm frustrated, don't interpret that as being I'm anti. Like I say, £1 million will be allocated this evening, unless I'm very much surprised. Yeah? But hey, I share your concerns that we wish to move forward. I've seen the draft of the report. There is a whole heap of suggestions, actions to be undertaken, but we need to get that report agreed by Policy and Resources Committee and then move forward. I'm sure we will. Every party here agreed to this motion. It went through unanimously.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I have your permission, please, to defer to my colleague, Councillor Steve Mumford, to reply?
You certainly can, because Steve's straight to the point.
I'm part of the working group, and as the leader says, we have to report back to them in April, and we do have a whole host of things that we are going to report back that we wish to see them implement. There is concurrent activity happening. You've heard about the £1 million. On the 13th of March, the working group are meeting with landowners, and we have got a presentation about rewilding, and we're trying to get commitment from the local farmers to rewild land. So there is concurrent activity happening. We've already fed back a number of things we would like the strategic planning, who are looking at the review, to focus in on certain of our policies with the view of collecting the evidence so we're able to put in more stiffer policies that will address the climate change and biodiversity. So there, I assure you, there is a large action plan. We are taking expert advice and we're forming the action plan on that, but there is concurrent activity. I planted 1,000 trees Saturday.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ms Jeffries. There are no questions from members of the Council to the Chairman of Committees. There is no report from the Leader of the Council on current issues this evening. Thank you for thinking about that, Councillor Cox. I call upon Councillor Webb to move the recommendation of the Democracy and General Purpose Committee related to a pay policy statement 2020. Recommendation on page 14.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the meeting of the Democracy Group on the 29th of January, we discussed the proposal, and I would like to move the recommendation that the proposed pay policy statement 2020 attached as Appendix 1 be approved for publication on the Council's website by 31st of March 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder?
Councillor English.
Councillor English, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this? No. Thank you. Is the recommendation agreed? Thank you. Before I call upon Councillor Cox to move the recommendation of the Policy and Resource Committee related to the medium-term financial strategy and budget proposals 2020 to 21, I would remind members that as a consequence of the local authorities' standard orders, England amendments, regulations 2014, there will need to be a recorded vote on the amendment or decision relating to the budget of the council tax setting. This will enable people to see how their councillor voted. But also on any amendment proposals at the meeting. I now call upon Councillor Cox to move the recommendation of the Policy and Resource Committee relating to the medium-term financial strategy and budget proposals 2020 to 21, recommendations on pages 46-48. Is that seconded? Yep, they're just trying to get through.
Move it and then
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Can you move it, Councillor Cox?
Exactly. The recommendations from Policy and Resources Committee, as set out in the agenda item, would allow the Council to agree a balanced budget for next financial year of 2021 and to set the necessary level of council tax. I'm pleased to say that the Maidstone Council is broadly self-sufficient financially. About 90% of our income is under local control. However, this also means that we must take responsibility ourselves for the sound management of our finances. The papers before you show that Council is in a strong position financially, with an adequate but not excessive level of reserves. We're therefore as prepared as we can be for the new local government funding regime, which is due to be implemented in 2021-22. But the focus of this budget is on the year 2021. For the next year, the government has increased the amount of business rates that we're allowed to keep in line with inflation. This in turn allows us to set the standstill budget of council tax. Tax also goes up in line with inflation. This will keep our income steady in real terms and allow us to continue delivering the same wide range of services as currently. This report therefore recommends a 2% increase to council tax in line with the government's target for inflation. Alongside the revenue budget, we are maintaining a capital investment. The capital programme helps us deliver our strategic priorities by addressing housing need, improving infrastructure and making Maidstone a thriving place. In particular, next year's budget, we have responded to the Council's declaration of a biodiversity climate change emergency by setting aside £1 million in the capital programme to support this agenda. So in conclusion, the budget set out in these papers and proposed level of council tax will allow us to maintain our services to the public and meet our strategic priorities as a council. I therefore move recommendations set out on page 46 of your papers.
Thank you, Councillor. So now I ask him out, Councillor.
Is that seconded?
Yeah. Is that seconded?
Blackmore, I think.
Yeah. Councillor Blackmore. Do you wish to speak? No? Reserving your right. Okay. Right. Now we're going into looking to Councillor Mackay.
I think he had his hand up.
Yeah. To move an amendment.
Yes, I'd like. I'd like to move an amendment to what's on your papers, and the amendment you can find on the third page of the last page of the questions. Yeah? So if we've all found page 3. So I move that recommendations of Policy and Resources Committee relating to the medium-term financial strategy and budget proposals 2020-21 be approved subject to the addition of the following. 1. That is noted that the Policy and Resources Committee has agreed that any unused members' community grants for 2019-20 and the first call on any other unused resources from 2019 and 20 be used to create a one-off provision for members' grants, up to £750 for each councillor to use in 2021. That has already been agreed by Policy and Resources. That a further £13,750 be allocated from 2019-20 unused resources to the extent that these are available from the budget surplus, being a further £250 per councillor to bring the members' community grant up to £1,000 per councillor for a one-off basis of 2021. So basically, we retain for 1 year only our members' community grant. We are not suggesting any additional monies, but we will use unused resources from this year's budget. So that is the proposal, and I hope we all agree that is a good proposal and we can use the money wisely. Thank you.
Have you got a seconder? Yeah, John. Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Mackay. Yeah, I strongly support
Sorry, John,
this.
are you seconding?
Yeah, I said I second it, yeah.
Oh, right, lovely, thank you.
I'm sorry, I do apologise.
Yeah.
I wasn't being clear. I'm pleased to second this. I realise that even some members of my group don't actually necessarily support this, but I do. And I think actually it's a very useful facility for a councillor to have. I've used my grant this year already, and it's very useful, particularly in areas like mine, where you can make a little contribution to very important local facilities. And I think it's a very good thing to have. I'm not wholly on now about it. I mean, some people said it's a bit of a bribe. I don't believe that. It's not. And I think it's a very useful thing for us to make a contribution to. So I totally support this, and I support the proposal of Councillor Mackay. I do have an additional comment on the budget, but I don't know whether this is the right place to say it. No, okay, I'll come back. I'd like to come back on that, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Next one on the list is Councillor Cox. No, do you want to speak now? No, okay. Councillor English.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. It's not a lot of money, but to many organisations in this borough, and as you find out, Madam Mayor, when you're Mayor, as I did before you, there are many, many organisations in this borough of vastly different sizes who do good work. And a small amount of money at the right time to those organisations can affect positively the lives of a disproportionately large number of people. And I think in this day and age when we are always saying how little we can do, how constrained our resources are, I'm terribly sorry, but we can't help you because that this sort of small but much appreciated gesture is something we should all support. I'd like to be in a position where we could guarantee it going forward, but when you're budgeting, you have to be cautious and take it on a year-by-year basis, and that is what we're doing. And I support the proposal, and I'm glad to see there's a fairly good cross-party consensus on it.
Councillor Burton. Oh, sorry, David. Sorry, Matt.
The two Burtons,
We'll get there, don't we?
I'm going to be the dissenter on this one, I'm afraid. And I'll... let me tell you why, and it relates to the larger motion before us, which is the budget. I have concerns about our budget. I have voiced those through SPI a number of times. I have tried to build the reassurance that the amounts of money, and forgive me, I've focused in on the planning portfolio budget, because it's the one that I know best. I've looked at spreadsheets showing resource deployment with officers that didn't tally up. And we've followed that up with more looking at it, and what I've been given is assurance that it'll be all right, but I've not been able to substantiate for myself that the budget will work. So in the context that I have a concern, and I think we have no choice tonight but to substantially bring this budget forwards. We need to have a balanced budget, but I have concerns. So if there's a spare £50,000, that's a planning officer. We talk about all this, you know, the climate change agenda, and actually that needs to be implemented, and you need people putting the policy in place and then actually enacting the policy. And I don't think we've got enough slack in the system to be granting ourselves £1,000 discretionary each when the big targets, in my opinion, are vulnerable to not being resourced properly. So I cannot support this amendment, and I've expressed my concerns on the larger issue.
Councillor. Now, if I say Councillor Burton, you'll know who you are, won't you? Just checking.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and may I just say how very good it is to see that when considering the orders in which councillors called Burton get to speak, you are employing the principle of age before beauty. Now, I could already see when this motion was raised and I threw my hand up, a few members on the benches opposite smirking at me because I have routinely and repeatedly voiced my opposition to this, so it would be remiss of me to then vote for this evening's amendment. I will just explain, as I always feel I do have to, exactly why that is that I'm doing so. I entirely appreciate that the sums of money that we are talking about here are not huge in the grand consideration of our budgeting, but mean a huge amount to the organisations that may receive them. However, I feel on principle that it flies in the face of the collective responsibility that we all have for apportioning public money when we give the right to individuals to largely unchecked dish it out. If this were coming to us under the proviso that applications for dispensation of these monies were then brought to a committee for a nod, I would totally support it. But a simple set of rules on a piece of paper, an application process that nobody in the public eye has access to, I'm sorry, but I just think it is an improper way of spending taxpayers' money.
Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this is a very sensible proposal from my colleague, and I'm glad it's been seconded by both leaders of the other two main groups on the council. This is the third time this will be a one-off budget proposal, so hopefully, you never know, next year it might be another one-off. But giving members a very small amount of money is something which I proposed when I was Vice Chair of P&R, when we looked also at the Go Wilding project. It enables councillors to support local community groups and local initiatives, and I know various people have used it for community groups with various charities, various sort of public halls and that type of stuff within their own patch to improve people's lives. If people who've been on the council for 3 or 4 years will remember, at one point we did consider a community lottery, which didn't go forward, but if it had have gone forward, that money would have been distributed in a similar way to the concept behind the members' grants. We have to remember that KCC, our colleagues, have considerably more money allocated to themselves to use than the amounts we're talking of. I think they have a factor of at least 10 times my most recent understanding. This money can really help. We don't give grants to local groups as an authority overall, but local groups are the bread and butter. And we were talking about infrastructure and so on earlier, and that is where the work is done, and that is where pride in our place comes. That's one of our corporate strap lines, and this can actually help us to do that. We're not suggesting allocating any money out of the 2020-21 budget of the 21,286,000 odd. This money is from an underspend in the current financial year. So all we're suggesting is that we use money which we've underspent across various places in the council to enable us to continue to assist our communities to actually improve themselves, which is surely one of the core policies and values of this local authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Annabel Blackmore, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, can I just say I would like us, when we vote on the budget, to vote on individual items, please. I hope you'd agree with that, rather than taking all of them together. I know we've done that with other things. I know people talk about this is only a marginal amount, but it's really easy when it's someone else's money. You know, if you were talking about £13,000 of your own money, would you just be sitting there giving it out to whoever and sundry without vetting who you're giving it to? I'm sorry, I agree with Councillor Burton Jr. Councillor Burton Jr., Councillor Matthew Burton, because I think when you are giving out money, public money, there should be a vetting process, there should be something. Is it a bribe? I don't know, that seems a bit strong in my opinion. £1,000 a councillor, absolutely right, but what are the indirect costs? We're told there aren't any, but there must be indirect costs because an officer somewhere has to spend their time sorting out whatever the forms are that do come in, and then the monies that are then transferred. So, yes, we've got £1,000 a councillor. Sorry, Councillor Comance, I know you're tired and yawning in the corner. I know we've got £1,000 per councillor, but we've still got an indirect cost. We didn't support the community lottery because we give money to the Citizens Advice Bureau and they see a lot of people who do have gambling issues. So I think that that conflict of interest was too great for us at the time. Personally, I'm sorry, can't support this. And if there were members, and I would add this as a postscript, if there were members who are really unhappy with the budget, why didn't you turn up to Policy and Resources and voice your concerns at the time and maybe put forward alternatives at the time if you were that unhappy about it? So, sorry, this one is not for me. I did support the original budget. I do agree with that because it is balanced and the right thing to do, but I don't agree with this amendment.
Sorry, before I go any more, Councillor Blackwood, what part of it, of the budget amendment? Just the amendment? Yeah, yeah, just the amendment.
Well, no, Madam Mayor, if the amendment was agreed, so this comes in at numbers 18 and 19, and you vote for it all together, then I have to vote against the budget. But I actually agree with the budget as it is, but it's the amendments I do not agree with, if that makes sense. So, although I've said vote for it on an individual basis, if you have a way of breaking it up, then happy to support, if that makes sense.
So we could vote 1 to 17.
Sorry, I'm not ignoring you. The officers...
I know it doesn't make any difference to the bottom line numbers.
Yeah.
Do you want me to
Who wants to do that? Yeah?
Okay.
Can everybody listen to the Chief Exec? Everybody listen to the Chief Exec, please.
So I think we're jumping ahead slightly in that we don't know what the outcome of the vote on the amendment is. So on an assumption that the amendment is carried, then if it might not be, but I take the point you want to know the answer to that. My advice would be take recommendations 1 to 17 together, because together they allow the setting of a balanced budget. If you wish to take 18, what would become 18 separately, then I don't think that would prejudice the position. But what I would say is that if the amendment is to be carried, it doesn't impact on the assumptions and the recommendations for next year's budget at all. Yep. So either way, if you're concerned about the amendment and it's been carried, then it doesn't affect all the other assumptions. So taking all of it together shouldn't make a great deal of difference either. But I understand what you've said. So what I would recommend in those circumstances is take 1 to 17 and then the amendment separately if it's carried.
Did everybody understand that? If not, will someone come back?
So are you ready? You've got speakers still to take on the
Yeah.
amendment? Yeah.
Right. Councillor Garland, please.
Go for it.
I'm thinking about Councillor Garton, maybe. I've not indicated at all.
Was it Councillor Garton? Oh, I'm so sorry, Patrick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I support the amendment tonight because, unfortunately, I have to disagree with my colleagues to the left, Councillor Matt Burton, who is a rural member. An urban member. For our rural community, this grant is very important. Urban residents have a lot of support from the local authority. We've got Moat Park, we've got parks and everything else. My little grant, I actually distribute around rural village halls this year. I actually put my money where my mouth is because I do not only dash out the money, but I also help installing the things which have been purchased in those village halls. So it is very important that the rural taxpayer gets value for money for those little projects to keep their community afloat. And that's why I will support the amendment tonight. However, on the bigger picture, I have, like Councillor David Burton, very great concerns about the figures and whether they're tallying up. I gave it a lot of thought, and I heard about the guarantees we were given by officers. Will reluctantly, and I emphasize reluctantly, support the budget tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. There's a couple of things that I've heard that I'd like to put straight. I believe that when application is made by a member for the money, the validation of that charity is checked. That amount of checking is allocated in the original costings of this facility. Those are facts. They are checked. It is included in the budget. Okay? Now, the money that we are asking this to come from is in a projected outcome of Q4 being underspent. And if there's money from people's grants they haven't given, that will be rolled forward into this pot. So this is not affecting the budget for 2020-21. It is an underspend from 1920. I very much hear the questions about that we need to be putting money in different places. Therefore, that has to be looked at as we move forward when they come forward as problems and really present themselves. This is talking about money from this year. So I do hope that people can see, I do not want to say, or even though our finance director has said he's projecting a potential underspend next year, even with the budget we're looking at here, the outturn might be favourable. I don't want to put this allocation of money any more than the £750 that I thought was weighted at P&R. But I do see Mark is standing firm behind his projections, and there'll be money that people are not spending. Thank you very much, Matt. So that money will roll forward, and we will be able to give it to the people who will benefit within our community. But one, it is checked. Two, it is paid for, allocated time for an officer to do that. And three, it's from this year's underspend, which we will only see by the end of Q4. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Grigg, please.
Thank you. I certainly understand the importance of a balanced budget, and I'm always in favour of that. However, listening to the people speaking this evening about this money and how important it is, I thought it might help to just tell you a couple of things that I've spent my grant money on in the last couple of years. I'm looking at the bigger picture. I've bought things with that money like waders and river clearing equipment that enables my village to keep their waterways and drains clear, which stops it flooding. I've been able to buy a disabled ramp for the local Swiss Scouts hut, which means that disabled people are now able to use that facility. I've managed to pay for all the printing for Lou's neighbours, which means that vulnerable people in my village now know that there is someone that they can contact in order to get help within the village. I think all of those little things add up to a bigger picture that does save this council money. So I am very important. I understand the budget completely, and I know that it has to be balanced, but please don't think this is frivolous money. I'm not going out spending £1,000 on a party for my village. Everything I spend is vetted, and I'm glad that Martin has said that. Everything is vetted and it is spent very carefully, but always wisely, and it's always very well received by my village.
Thank you. Councillor Perry, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Grigg has actually said it all, because I think what she said is very powerful, and I totally agree. And in fact, I've used my money on drainage in my own village, and it's provided facilities for a lot of the kids in our village to play football, which they couldn't do, and that affects hundreds of children in my village, and that is a very important thing, and I don't think that's frivolous expenditure at all. And I'm glad Councillor Cox did raise the point that this is checked. I know that because I was very careful in filling in the forms and putting them in, and getting approval from the officers, and they do a very good job. So I think this is an extremely important facility, and Councillor Garton's right, particularly for us in rural areas, we can make a very big difference, and so I totally support it. But what I wanted to come back on is something different, a little bit different. It's what Councillor Burton said, and I'm going to a little bit reinforce what he said, because I think we are very concerned about the budget, this revenue budget that we've got to approve. We know we have to have a balanced budget, and it is based on reassurances that we've had that this is a balanced budget.
I am so sorry, but I've just been informed it's a debate on the amendment.
Yeah, but are we just on those bits on the amendment?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, I'm getting really confused with this whole procedure. I do want to come back on this, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor English?
I've spoken. I thought John Perry seconded the amendment. Isn't he allowed to sum up on the amendment? I thought the mover and seconder, one of them, got a chance to sum up on the amendment, and I thought that's what he was doing.
No, he was, and then it turned... Don't anyone blame me, this has all gone wrong.
It's not gone wrong. Okay.
So who am I now?
Chapeltay and then Rose.
Councillor Chapeltay, sorry, you're right at the end.
I have a brief question. We're talking about a theoretical surplus of about 13,000. If we didn't use it for this, what would happen to it? Would it go into reserves? Would it be a surplus used in the current account elsewhere? So what exactly would happen to this theoretical surplus otherwise?
When the outturn for the current financial year is reported to Policy and Resources Committee in June, it's up to Policy and Resources Committee to determine how any surplus is used. This amendment is effectively directing Policy and Resources to use the money in such and such a way.
Councillor Rose?
Well, the previous speaker and myself obviously are on a similar wavelength. My question was, with regards to this 13,000 odd pounds of extra money, is this the right time to be counting our chickens, if you like, before the end of the fourth quarter? If we're looking to allocate this potential extra money that could come about if councillors potentially don't spend the rest of their grants, and if we potentially have an overspend. It's obviously quite a big topic, as we've discussed it quite a lot this evening, but if there's extra money potentially to be had, isn't it better to discuss whether we give ourselves a bit more to give away after we know we've definitely got it?
been informed that it's a what? Rhetorical.
That sounded like a rhetorical question.
Question.
Who would be the best person to answer that?
I will. Don't know. Sorry, Dan. Sorry.
Would you like me to answer?
Yeah. Now, I've asked the Chief Exec to answer, Dan.
So I'd just like to reiterate what my colleague has recently said. If you believe that the decision is better taken once the outturn is known for sure, then that signals the way in which you should consider voting. We won't know that until June, as Mr. Green said. So if you believe that that's the point in time for making the decision on how that money is used, should it exist, then you should vote against the amendment. If you don't think that, I mean, I shouldn't really be telling you how to vote, obviously, but I think that's the question that you were asking, and I'm trying to give you as much clarity as I can on that.
Liz.
Do you want me to help?
Yep.
Would you like me to help?
Yep.
So Madam Mayor has asked me to clarify where we are in terms of procedure at the moment. So from what I can see, there's nobody else indicating to speak. So it's the opportunity for the proposer of the amendment, if he wishes to sum up, because the seconder has already spoken. And if you do, then please do. If you don't, then we'll go straight to the vote on just the amendment.
I believe we should go straight to the vote on the amendment.
I support that as well.
Yeah.
So all those four, just ask them to raise their hands.
Right. Raise your hands if for. And against?
And abstentions? Abstentions?
Me.
Yeah. Abstentions? Yeah?
Me.
Okay.
One.
So can put that.
Oh, no,
you
there
need to
isn't.
ask them for abstentions.
Abstentions?
2.
Who put their on? 2.
Yeah. Well, that's clearly carried.
So that has now been... I did vote. Thank you. So that's passed.
And becomes part of the
And how many?
4. Do you want me to read it out?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the vote was 47 in favour, 7 against and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. So would you...
Sorry, my dyslexia, 37-4.
Could you tell us where we are now? Chief?
Okay, so Madam Mayor has asked me to clarify what will happen next. So we're now moved to the debate on the motion that was put forward by the leader and seconded by Councillor Blackmore, which has been amended by the amendment that you have just agreed. Yeah, so that now... Yeah?
So that...
Well, No, we talked about how the voting would happen 1 to 17. The debate is on the substantive
Is all
motion.
of it the change? So is anybody got to talk? Has anybody got to talk, or we just go
If
to
they
the
want
vote?
to, yeah.
Councillor Perry.
Am I allowed to speak now? I'm not sure. I've been jumping up and down like a bloody jack in the box. No, I just wanted to say that I wanted to support what Councillor Burton has said earlier, that we do have real concerns about the budget and the way, and certainly the details behind the budget. So, I mean, I will vote for it, don't get me wrong on this one, because we need a balanced budget, but it's done on the reassurances and a certain amount of trust that we can meet our objectives and commitments as a council. And I do have real concerns in this area, particularly in areas like the local plan review, where I know we've got a lot of pressures on staff and our resources there, and also on planning and development control areas again. So I think we're concerned, some of us are certainly, at the level of details which we haven't really seen and we can't get our heads round. And so my support is very much on a trust and reassurance that this will all be okay. But what really worries me is the years subsequent to this, because there, if you look at 21, 22 onwards, then the picture is not that great, to be perfectly honest, and we've got a real issue there. So all I'm saying is I'm voting on this in favour, but with a real massive health warning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor English.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry.
Madam Mayor, councillors, we all have unease, particularly as we've watched the process of the local plan go on and the local plan review. And there are other issues around the council where we are not wholly in control of our destiny, where government decisions and budgets will impact. There's a lot of economic uncertainty. But what we do know is that this budget represents the best assumptions that we've been able to make at the moment, based on a not too glowingly optimistic view of circumstances. And in the position we are in, we have to pass this budget. We need a balanced budget. We also need to be aware, though, going forward, that we have to constantly monitor the situation to see that our assumptions are correct. Because if they aren't, we will have to make radical changes at some point in the next year or in the next budget. But at this stage, this is the best set of assumptions that we have, and therefore we must pass this budget.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's the perils of being a short bloke on the back row. I would like to, just very quickly before I come to my point on the substantive issue of the budget, I would just clarify again, because 18 and 19 are still up for debate at this point, that just for certainty of members' understanding of the way I voted the last time around, I am absolutely not against giving money to good causes in our communities, rather the methodology that it is given by under this scheme. I just thought I'd clear that one. The main point that I actually want to make in this part of the debate is to add some weight of support to the comments of Councillors Perry and Burton regarding the outstanding concerns that still exist with certain elements of this budget, and with particular reference to the significant risk warning that was issued by SPI to PNR at the previous stage of its consideration. Now, I was at the last PNR as a member and put a question directly to the Section 151 officer to try to ascertain whether we have certainty of being able to meet our commitments with reference to the local plan review under the constraints that this budget sets this evening. I have received on the public record those assurances, and although through conversations that I'm sure many of you will imagine Councillor Burton the first and I do have, we have not necessarily convinced ourselves. We have those assurances, and therefore I will be voting for the budget this evening.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? No?
Okay, so you need to go to the seconder now to see whether she wants to say anything.
Councillor Blackmore, do you wish to say anything as seconder?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm still slightly confused. When we actually come to to voting for the substantive budget, which is where we are now, sorry, the amendment has become part of the substantive. Is that correct? Right. So would we still be able to divide it into two parts? I'm sorry to be a complete pain about it. Happy to support 1 to 17, not happy about 18 and 19. If we're able to do that on that basis, then I can support the original budget, but it's just the amendment that gives me the heebie-jeebies. Because at this stage, who knows what we might need the money for. And it's very easy to say, it's just £13,000 here and it's just 39,000 there, and there might be another just 20,000 in the future, but you add up all those little pockets of money and you can do a whole lot more with it.
Councillor Blackmore, Chief Exec is going to reply.
So I think when you raised the question the first time, I indicated that the advice would be you vote on 1 to 17 together. If, yeah, and so I would still advise you to do that because it allows you to set a balanced budget. If you wish to vote on 18 and 19 separately, you can. But given that that is now part of the substantive motion, yeah, you might be voting on the bits separately, but it's part of the substantive. We will need to take 2 named votes because that's what the legislation requires for budget setting. Sorry?
To what, sorry? To what, David?
So, yeah, so we've got Councillor Sams, Janetta Sams.
Councillor Sams?
Thank you. Just for clarification, when we took the vote on the amendment, it said to be approved, the budget proposals to be approved subject to the addition of the following. So surely that vote that we had just had on the amendment puts it within the budget and therefore needs to be voted as a whole. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've been informed it doesn't. Marion is a type 1 diabetic, and because I had to come in early for a meeting, I haven't eaten anything. Exactly. Would you like a biscuit? So I'm not just munching. I think it's the first time I've done this for a couple of years.
Madam Mayor, that's why I yawned, because I'm diabetic too. Sorry, Anna.
Yep.
Suggest we move to the vote?
Can we move to the vote, please? No, we threw a talky remark. Martin, I'm giving you the opportunity to sum up. It's only because my sugar level's low.
I'm happy to go straight to the vote. I think I've said quite enough, and I'd like a biscuit too.
Okay. Right. So do you want me to?
Yes, please.
Okay, so members, I'm sorry if this will take a long time. So you're moving to the vote on the original papers, items 1 to 17 together. So when I call your name, will you say whether or not you're for, against, or you're abstaining? In alphabetical order, Councillor Atkinson. For. Councillor Blackmore. For. Councillor Bryce. For. Councillor Brindle. For. Councillor David Burton. For. Councillor Matt Burton. Not sure we got a category for that. Councillor Chapeltay. For. Councillor Clark. For. Councillor Cox. For. Councillor Cumming. For. Councillor Daly. For. Councillor English. For. Councillor Eaves. For. Councillor Fermor. For. Councillor Fissenden. For. Councillor Fort. For. Councillor Garland. For. Councillor Garton.
Reluctantly for.
Councillor Gooch. For. Councillor Grigg. For. Councillor Harper. For. Councillor Harvey. For. Councillor Harwood. For. Councillor Hasty. For. Thank you. Councillor Joy. For. Councillor Cadker. For. Thank you. Councillor Kimmins.
For.
Councillor Lewins. For. Councillor Mackay.
For.
Councillor Mortimer.
For.
Councillor Munford.
For.
Councillor Nagy.
For.
Councillor Newton. Can I just confirm that was for?
Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Parfitt-Reid.
For.
Councillor Perry.
For.
Councillor Powell.
Against.
Councillor Ring.
For.
Councillor Robertson.
For.
Councillor Rose. Daniel Rose.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Round.
For.
Councillor Janetta Sams.
Against.
Councillor Tom Sams.
Against.
Councillor Spooner.
For.
Councillor Springett.
For.
Councillor Vizard.
For.
Councillor Webb.
For.
And Councillor Young.
For.
Thank you. 44 and 3. Okay, so I'm sure that you were keeping tally as we went through. So the vote was 44 for, 3 against, and so that is carried. And we'll now move on to the same process for items 18 and 19. Does anybody need me to say what they were? And are you happy to take both of them together? Okay, so here we go. Councillor Atkinson. Councillor Blackmore.
Yes.
Councillor Bryce. Councillor Brindle. Councillor David Burton. Councillor Matt Burton. Councillor Chapeltay. Councillor Clark. Councillor Cox. Councillor Cumming. Councillor Daly. And Councillor English. Councillor Eaves. Councillor Fermor. Councillor Fissenden. Councillor Fort. Councillor Garland. Councillor Garton.
Still very reluctantly for.
Councillor Gooch.
Against.
Councillor Grigg. Councillor Harper.
In support.
Is that for? Thank you. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Harwood. Councillor Hasty. Councillor Joy. Councillor Cadker. Thank you. Councillor Kimmins. Councillor Lewins. Councillor Mackay. Councillor Mortimer. Councillor Mumford. Councillor Nagy. Councillor Newton. Against. Thank you. Councillor Parfitt-Reid? 4. Councillor Perry? 4. Councillor Powell? 4. Councillor Ring?
Against.
Councillor Robertson? 4. Councillor Daniel Rose?
Against.
Councillor Round?
4.
Councillor Janetta Sams? 4. Councillor Tom Sams? 4. Councillor Spooner?
4.
Councillor Springett?
4.
Councillor Vizard?
4.
Councillor Webb?
4.
And Councillor Young? 4. Thank you. So for recommendations 18 and 19, there were 38 in favour and 9 against, no abstentions, so they are carried as well. Thank you.
We're nearly there, councillors, nearly there. There are now...
Item 15.
Yep. Item 15, I call upon the Director of Mid-Kent Services to present the report related to business rates retail relief recommendations on page 182.
Two here. No. You have to present it.
Yep. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to commend the report and recommendations to Council.
You need somebody to propose
Is-
and second it.
Yep. Have I heard a proposer? Councillor Cox. Have I a seconder? Councillor English.
Is the motion agreed?
Is the motion agreed? Item 16, I call upon the Head of Policy, Communication and Governance to submit the report relating to the calendar of meetings 2020 and 21.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I commend the report to Council.
Is there a proposer?
The leader?
Yep. Councillor Cox. And is the motion agreed?
No, is there a seconder?
Oh no.
Seconder.
Sorted that out. No, Denise had her hand up. I just forgot to say her name. Yeah.
Seconded by Councillor Clara.
Yeah.
Is it agreed?
Thank you all very much for being so patient tonight. It isn't easy sometimes, but thank you all for how kind you was to Bob. I'm sure he really, really will sleep better tonight knowing that he's got friends out there. So, end of meeting, thank you.